said with this is going to be a little quieter service, so let's go ahead and mute that. There we go. Keep watching. Man, don't you just sometimes wish that you could go around muting things in life, right? Like maybe you can mute this person, or maybe you can mute that person, or maybe it's your kids you want to mute. Kids, maybe it's your parents you want to mute, right? Maybe it's a boss you just wish you could change the channel on, or maybe it's a season in life you could fast forward through, or maybe it's something you want to rewind back to. But it'd be nice to be able to do that every once in a while, right? I grew up in the 90s, and I don't know about you, but it was a little different back then. If you grew up in the 90s or 80s or any time before, the difference that our culture and the world has drifted towards. And I grew up, I visited my grandparents a lot. And my grandparents, they were just a quieter type of people. And I would go there, and we would just kind of hang out, and there wouldn't be much to do. I didn't have a cell phone or anything, but one of the things they love to do in the afternoons is turn on a golf tournament and watch golf. Now, I can't think of anything more quieter on TV than golf. Even the announcers, they're whispering, right? They're whispering, like, are they going to make this shot? We gotta wait. And then if it makes a shot, play a little golf clap. And, as a 12-year-old, I'm just sitting there like, oh, this is riveting, sitting with my grandparents watching golf. And then the commercial would come on, and I'd be like, finally, like something. And you know what they did? No matter who was holding the remote, they would mute the commercials. They'd be like, no, we don't need that. No, we do need that. I need something here, right? And then the golf tournament would come back on, and inevitably my grandpa, he'd yell at my grandma, unmute the TV, so you could hear the golf tournament, I guess. And again, it was just really quiet. And then at 4 o'clock, the party really started because we watched Jeopardy. And then, I don't know if there's a quieter game show either, Jeopardy, but let's face it, it was a quieter time back then. And anyone born after 1995 probably cannot really comprehend how drastically different the world used to be. I'm an 80s and 90s kid. I love that I got to know what life pre-smartphone was like. I even remember getting a cordless phone at home as our landline. Anybody like this? Just like that, this cordless phone. I remember like, oh yeah, like I can walk around the whole house without a cord. And I remember the cordless phone we got had a digital answering machine. Like how neat was that? But seriously, growing up in the 90s and earlier was different, wasn't it? And I had to call my friends every time to go play, and I would talk to my friends' parents so much because they'd always answer the phone. And so I got to know my friends' parents. And if they weren't home, you had no idea when they were going to get back. You just leave a message and wait by the phone until they called to say they could play. In many ways, the luxuries and conveniences of technology today, they don't make things simpler, do they? In a lot of ways, things were simpler then. I mean, of course, it wasn't convenient to have to go find a payphone to call mom to check in. Like you're riding your bike around town, you're like, oh, I'm supposed to check in. I gotta go find a phone, and you go find a payphone, put a couple quarters in, call mom. But it was simpler not being attached to a phone in your pocket. As a kid, I knew how to deal with boredom a lot better in life. You remember what it was like standing in a line and not having a phone to look at? You just let your mind wander, or you look at the questionable tabloid headlines in the checkout line, or you judge the items of the person in front of you. When my mom would leave the house, I'd have no way of getting a hold of her. I wouldn't know when she was coming home. I wouldn't know how long she'd be gone. I had to figure out things on my own, and it really wasn't that long ago that life was like that. We're talking like 15, 20 years ago, everything has changed. Everything has changed. And for those born after 1995, it's all you ever knew. But for those of us who have lived in a world where half was pre-technology everywhere and half is living in it, I can't even really fathom a life without cell phone technology. We've got to the point where it's hard for me to even remember what it was like back then. Most of us agree that this technology of having a phone in your pocket or access to internet everywhere, it's made life more convenient, and we even may feel more connected. But it would also be hard to argue that it has made us more distracted and maybe less present. With the convenience and connectivity, we've become distracted and absent. Just how distracted have we become with our phones in the last 2 decades? Here's some statistics just for fun. We check our phones. Let's not pick up our phones. We check our phones or by glancing or just looking at, on average, 344 times a day. That's once every 4 minutes. The average person touches their phone over 2,617 times a day. 74% of people feel uneasy or have anxiety when leaving their phone at home. 71% of people say they check their phones within the first 10 minutes of waking up. Half of people say they've never gone longer than 24 hours without their cell phone. 35% use or look at their phone while driving. 70% check their phones within 5 minutes of receiving a notification. 61% have texted someone in the same room as them. I've done that. 48% feel a sense of panic or anxiety when their battery level drops below 20%. 45% say that their phone is their most valuable possession. 43% use or look at their phone while on a date. This might be why you're single. 62% sleep with their phone at night on their bed. 64% use their phones when on the toilet. Just threw that one in there just for fun. Needless to say, we are a distracted people, right? We are distracted people. We're highly dependent on being distracted. We almost crave the distractions by the way we interact with our devices. We have come to not just accept the constant noise that's all around us, but we've, in a lot of ways, embraced it. For many of us, we don't know what to do without it. Maybe we have the TV on all day as kind of background noise, or every time we get in the car, we turn the music on or talk radio. When we're waiting for whatever, we need noise. Everyone in our house, we sleep with like a fan on. It's kind of ironic. We actually use noise to drown out noise. Today, if I was watching golf with my grandparents, I'm pretty sure I'd have my phone out, When the commercials come on, I take my phone out. When Jeopardy would come on, I'd Google all the answers to get them right. There's not a situation where I can't imagine not having my phone out. Standing in line, trying to contact my friends to go play. My oldest daughter asked my wife and I when she's getting a phone. And we tell her, never. Never, you're never getting a phone. I'm not eager to start that addiction and dependence on a device with her. It changes you in a lot of ways. I guess the question I want to pose today is this. Is the constant noise and distraction of our world really that big of a deal? So what that I'm surrounded by noise all day? Whether it's my phone or my computer or TV or the 24/7 news cycles or social media or my car radio or my kids or my job, the truth is it's a loud world, isn't it? It's just the world we live in. But maybe a better question is, can I hear God above the volume of my life? Can I hear God above the volume of my life? I think we want to, right? We may even expect to. When's the last time you heard from God? Some of us would say church. Some would admit that we can't think of the last time we heard God speak to us. But we expect him to be louder than the volume of our lives because, after all, God is powerful. And if there's anyone that can be loud and get our attention, it's him. So, God, be louder than the noise that's around us. That's a lot of times our prayer. The only problem is God speaking to us over the noise is counter to what we see in Scripture. It's counter to what we see in Scripture. Now, there are many ways that God speaks to us. God speaks to us through Scripture, through his word. He can speak to us through godly friends and family. God can speak to us through music and through sermons and nature and creation. However, I truly believe that the way God wants to speak to us is in our undivided attention, alone in the Spirit. You and Jesus, no one and nothing else. John Mark Comer, he said this. He said, the noise of the modern world makes us deaf to the voice of God, drowning out the one input we need the most. There was an event that took place in the Old Testament that shows God speaking to a prophet named Elijah. I love this passage. I love this story. We see Elijah, he's fleeing for his life. He's scared for his life, and he flees into the wilderness to be with God. And we pick up in verse 4 of 1 Kings 19. It says, "But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he asked that he might die, saying, 'It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life. I am no better than my fathers.' And he lay down and he slept under a broom tree." And then we go on to see in verse 11, and he's encountered by an angel. "And behold, the angel said, 'Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord.'" So Elijah is looking to hear from God, and he goes out and he stands on the mountain before the Lord. "And behold, the Lord passed by. And a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?'" I love this story because it kind of grabs our attention a little, right? Like God didn't reveal himself to Elijah through the wind or through the earthquake or through the fire. Ways that Elijah maybe expected to hear from God or for God to grab his attention, but rather through a whisper. Another version says a still small voice. And I believe that God wants to speak to you in the same manner. That we need to slow down our pace and turn down our volume. I'm not necessarily telling you to cut out tons of things in your life and get rid of all the noise, but if you want to hear from God in the most effective manner possible, you may need to have regular times where you are slowing down your pace and turning down your volume. Because of this, silence is the beginning of the voice of God. Silence is the beginning of the voice of God. You know, for the last couple of weeks, we've been in a series called Jesus in the Spirit, and we've been looking at how the Holy Spirit fills us and leads us and empowers us. And we've been learning that these things based off of Jesus being filled and led and empowered by the Spirit in his own life. Like he submitted to the Spirit and was baptized. He was led into the Spirit by the Spirit into the wilderness, where he fasted and used Scripture to defeat temptation. And throughout the series, we're learning about some spiritual practices that are crucial to our spiritual formation. And you remember last week we said that spiritual formation is the process through which we are inwardly transformed so that what comes out of us is reflected by what is in us. It's a spiritual formation. It's a transformation. So what spiritual practice are we tackling today? What did Jesus do to battle the noise in his life? Now, of course, Jesus didn't have a phone in his cloak or a TV at home or a radio in his donkey, but he was surrounded by noise. Whether it was Satan in his ear tempting him or the constant pull of people wanting an audience with him, be it his disciples or the crowds or the religious people that wanted to take him down, he was the most famous person to walk the earth. So as you can imagine, the noise around him was pretty loud. So today we're going to see how crucial it was for Jesus to be alone in the Spirit, to actually be alone in the Spirit. Tracing back to last week, we saw Jesus, after he was baptized, going into the wilderness, right after he was baptized. And he fasted to be with the Father. And Luke chapter 4, verse 1, we read this last week, but it says, Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. And we remember Satan unleashed temptation after temptation. And we realized that Jesus was able to fight back. You see, Jesus was at the top of his spiritual game because he was practicing being with the Father alone. And that was just the start. In Mark chapter 1, we see a lot of things going on here. Okay, Mark chapter 1, we see just how busy Jesus was. Just in that chapter, just in Mark chapter 1, he was baptized. He was led to the wilderness for 40 days. He came back and he began his ministry. And he calls his disciples and he heals many people. And Jesus worked with urgency through this time. In fact, the word immediately is used 40 times alone in the Gospel of Mark. Immediately, Jesus went to the wilderness to be tempted. Immediately, Jesus called his disciples. Immediately, they followed. He immediately entered the synagogue and began preaching. Immediately, people approached him to be healed. After healing, he immediately left the synagogue, and people immediately started talking about Jesus. It's such a strong word, isn't it? You know, when I hear the word immediately, I think urgent. And don't we have those days sometimes? I mean, not like the days Jesus had, but those days where everything seems immediate and urgent, and everything is super important. What's your reaction to days like that? What's your response? You know, sometimes I just want to crawl into a hole or go into my basement and just, mind numb out. Turn on Netflix. Eat cookies. I don't know, something. But I'm like, I need a break, right? I could just feel the exhaustion from reading through that chapter. So what does he do after all that? We get to verse 35, still in Mark chapter 1. After all this has taken place, we get to verse 35 of Mark chapter 1, and it says this. Very early the next morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, he left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. You know, not that long ago, he had spent 40 days in the wilderness to be alone with the Father. And in the very same chapter of Mark, he's off to spend some additional time alone with the Father after a crazy long day. He gets up early to do so. He doesn't sleep in. He doesn't take the day off. He wakes up early and goes to be by himself to pray. You know, if I just got off of a 40-day wilderness retreat with God, in my mind, I would think, I'm good for a while. Jesus, he had a long day, and he's like, it's time to reconnect with God. And this was not the end. He keeps doing this throughout his ministry and the rest of his life. You know, could he possibly be onto something here? Probably. Luke chapter 5, it says this in verse 15. It says, but even now more, the report about him went abroad, and great crowds began to gather to hear him. So the news about Jesus is spreading. Great crowds are gathering to be healed of their infirmities. And in verse 16, but he would withdraw to desolate places and pray. I love that passage in different versions. It says, in that one, desolate places, and another one it says he would withdraw to lonely places and pray. Or he withdrew himself to the wilderness and prayed. Or out of the way places for prayer. Or he went by himself to pray in the desert. Or he just slipped away to be alone so he could pray. In Luke chapter 6, it says, in these days he went out to the mountain to pray. And all night he continued to pray in God. So we got wilderness, the solitary, desolate, lonely, out of the way, desert, slipped away to be alone, mountain. Wherever he was, he found a place to be with God alone. And doesn't that speak loudly? That the Son of God found the need to withdraw to be alone with God in the Spirit. And you know, the more Jesus was sought after, the more he withdrew to be alone with God. We often do the opposite, right? Like the more we're sought after, the more we have things pulling us for our time, the more immediate we are, the urgency in our life. We'll simply say we just don't have the time. We don't have time to slow down. You know, there were many reasons Jesus regularly withdrew to be alone. To pray, to hear from God, to recharge. He did it to be with his thoughts, to seek guidance, to deal with distress. He also did it to grieve. Right after Jesus learned of the death of John the Baptist, in Matthew 14, verse 13, it says, when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place, again, by himself. And then I love what happens in the next sentence. It says, but when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. And what a great picture this is. Jesus withdrawing to be alone in the Spirit, and then the people are just following him. And you know, it wasn't until I started practicing spiritual reading that we talked about last week that this verse, this second part really stood out to me, that the crowds followed him. You know, at first I'm thinking, poor Jesus, right? Like he just needs a break. But then as I read, I start thinking, I'm like, wait, no, yes, like go crowds, like go follow him. It doesn't matter where Jesus is going, they were going to follow him. Will I follow Jesus even to that quiet place? Or will I continue to expect him above the noise? Expect to hear him above the noise. You know, I picture Jesus just withdrawing to this desolate place, and I'm standing there, and I'm faced with this decision. Do I follow him there, or do I stay where I am? Surely he'll come back. Surely he'll return. Maybe he can meet me on my schedule. You know, the crowds left where they were to meet him where he was. And that's where he wants to meet you and I. And while silence is the beginning of the voice of God, solitude is setting yourself up for encountering Jesus on your own. And this is key here, on your own. You know, I think we can encounter Jesus so many ways, but when we can only encounter Jesus in a room like this, or through a sermon or a book written by someone else, all good things, I believe we're missing out on the vast majority of opportunities to actually encounter Jesus, to actually hear from God. And I realize just saying the word silence and solitude, it gives some of you the chills. You're like, oh, is there any other words to use besides that? You know, devotional time, something. You know, anybody in here, you just cannot stand silence. Like there's silence. You're like, what's next? Somebody's got to talk. Okay, I'll talk. You know, you just got to break this silence. Perhaps you're scared of being alone, or, you know, I personally can't relate to that as an introvert. I can understand it though. Like, I can understand how that can be maybe a very difficult thing. We're afraid of where our thoughts will go. We're scared of confronting our true selves. It means we confront our sin or the ways our lives have reflected what's really in our hearts. You know, what's God going to tell me to do? Or how's God going to tell me to change? I don't want to hear that. You know, stopping for silence and solitude, it also means that we have to stop being productive. And let's be honest, there's some of us in here, that's our worst fear, to not be productive. If even for a minute, we judge ourselves by what we accomplish and what we do. Taking time for silence and solitude, time to be with Jesus alone with the Spirit, acknowledges that we are not valued by what we do, but rather we are valued by who we are. We're not valued by doing, but valued by being. And some of you need to hear this today, that God does not value you by what you do. You can do nothing, and he sees your worth. And we're not like that as humans, are we? We define our worth by what we do. You may define my worth by what I do, but God says you don't have to do anything. Just be. Just be here. And in fact, I would rather you just be. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to accomplish anything. Here's what we know about silence and solitude. One is this: silence and solitude was necessary for Jesus. That's the first thing we know, and that's extremely important to know. How do we know this? It's because Jesus did it a lot. If Jesus himself, the literal Son of God, needed solitude with the Father to function, what makes us think that we can live a spiritually full life without it? Here's the truth: we can't. We cannot do it. You cannot live a spiritually full life without solitude with God, without withdrawing to a desolate place, a desert place, a solitary place, a quiet place. Why was Jesus the most compassionate, loving, and sacrificial person to ever walk the earth? Could it be that Jesus' time with the Father gave him a greater capacity for time with others? That Jesus wasn't taking time alone to get away from people, but he was actually increasing his capacity to love well by making silence and solitude a non-negotiable. When we make silence and solitude with God, being alone in the Spirit, when we make that a priority, our capacity for loving and caring for others will grow as well. In fact, the busier he became, the more he sought silence and solitude. It was clearly a top priority for him because his ministry flowed from his solitude. When we forego silence and solitude, when we skip over this most important practice where all other practices branch out from, that's when we become spiritually dry. You know, that's when we think that everything else in life is more important than God, and we act on it. And that's when we live with that high level of stress and anxiety That's when we get exhausted by everything fighting for our attention. That's when we try to find escapes elsewhere. That's when we get extremely judgmental and critical and are threatened by the success and happiness of other people. That's when we have unhealthy reactions to our life and circumstances. You know, about a year ago, I did something that some of you would consider borderline psychotic. I was a little skeptical, too, going into it. I took place in a 4-day silent retreat. 4 days, silent retreat. Some of you are like, you are a psycho, right? But even as an expert introvert, this was a little frightening for me. You know, 4 days with just Jesus and my thoughts. And 4 days just being alone with the Spirit. Now, there were other guys there, but there was no talking. There was no talking. At first, the meals were pretty awkward when you're sitting at a table with other guys and you can't talk. And you're like, pass the rolls. How do I say rolls? And the guy picks up a bowl of broccoli. I'm like, no, like, not the broccoli, the rolls. Like, starting to get mad. I'm like, all right, you know, this is okay. It's not a big deal. I can eat more broccoli. It's fine. But after a while, like, it became freeing. It became freeing. And the amount of reading and praying that took place over the time was invaluable. And I'm not a journaler, but I did a lot of journaling. The thoughts I was confronted with, the inner mirror I finally slowed down enough and quieted down enough to look into, to evaluate my true self was priceless. The ways I heard Jesus speak in small whispers as I was alone in the Spirit was something worth more than any 4-day conference or class I ever went to. You know, what I found is you enter into silence and solitude with Jesus, but you exit with clarity and conviction of your calling in the Spirit, which we all have. We know we practice silence and solitude because Jesus practiced it. It was necessary for him, but also it unlocks that still small voice, that whisper from God. Silence and solitude unlocks that. When we're alone in the Spirit that is already inside of us, the truth is God's voice lives inside of us. It's our time alone in the Spirit that enables us to effectively hear it. Diving into the practice of silence and solitude, it requires us to do something that is counter to what we're drawn to. Typically, we're drawn to noise and people and relationships, and that's what the world is drawn to. And obviously, those things are not bad, but that's not what I'm getting at today. They're getting at this fact of what makes this practice so difficult. It goes against the grain of our lives. And until we're drawn more to the presence of God than the noise and productivity around us, or it's going to be a practice that we're going to fight against. But silence and solitude will probably be the most important thing you do in your spiritual journey with Jesus. It's the thing from which all other things spill out of your life. It's the practice that will develop the fruit that will create better relationships with others, more patience in parenting, more wisdom in your job, a softer heart to serve others, and a you that is more in tune with the Holy Spirit's leading in your life. It's a practice that sets up all other practices, such as fasting and spiritual reading of scriptures. Henry Nouwen, he actually said, without solitude, it's virtually impossible to live a spiritual life. It's all based on what we do, not based on who we are in the Spirit. So it was necessary for Jesus. It unlocks that still small voice inside. It also does this. It brings rest for your mind, body, and soul. And I would say some of us in here, we need that, right? We need rest. Rest is crucial in your health. When you spend time alone in the Spirit, you're resting your mind, which goes 100 miles an hour all day long. Your body, which tries to keep up with the demands of the day. And your soul, which is in a constant spiritual battle. It can also look like a Sabbath day every week. You know, our family, we've been trying over the last couple of years to make a 24-hour Sabbath period a priority. It is really difficult to do that. I mean, extremely difficult. And you think, yeah, we can do that. And once you get into it, you realize how extremely challenging. It just goes against the grain of everything. And we fail a lot, but we think it's important to try to incorporate this. So from dinner Friday to dinner Saturday, we try and put our phones away, as in turn them off. We try to clear our schedules. We try to make time with each other and time with God. Maybe for your family, it's lunch Saturday to lunch Sunday, or dinner Saturday to dinner Sunday, and you include church into that. Try holstering your phone for 24 hours. Let people know that may try and contact you, and we've done that. We're like, hey, we're unreachable for 24 hours. If you need us, knock on our door, I guess, or just wait 24 hours. And we've never been needed enough to have a knock on the door. Let people know that this is important. Just this is what we're doing. It can be done, surprisingly. And it's glorious. It is amazing when it is done. You need rest. You need spiritual rest. You need physical rest. You need emotional rest. And you need it regularly. So it brings rest to your mind, body, and soul. And the last thing it does, it recalibrates your priorities. Totally recalibrates your priorities. When you make silence and solitude a priority, you'll begin to see other priorities begin to shift in your life. The things that you once thought were urgent and important maybe don't seem to be that urgent and important. We begin to battle the lies we've spent so much time and energy believing about ourselves because those voices are louder than God's. We begin to love others better around us. Maybe we even begin to embrace the quiet moments more. We're okay if our phone dies. We set time limits maybe on social media. Maybe it's as simple as we begin to see God's direction for our lives and we stop living by everyone else's direction for our lives. So real quickly as we wrap up, what does it look like to do this? What does it look like to practice this? It can look like a set time every day. Maybe for you it's in the morning before everyone gets up. My wife, she does really good. She gets up really early. I don't know how she does. She gets up really early before everyone wakes up. Maybe for you it's at night when everyone else goes to bed. Maybe it's in the middle of the day when the kids are at school or during a lunch break. But no distractions. Find that quiet place, that desert place. You don't actually have to go to a desert. Just find that place. Find that place. Maybe it's at home. Maybe it's outside. Maybe it's in the backyard. Leave your phone somewhere else. So you're not going to be able to do it if it's in earshot, arm reach. Also, no one else around you. This is important as well. I've been convicted lately with my time with God in the mornings. You see, I'll come downstairs, grab a cup of coffee, and I'll sit in my chair in the living room and pull out my Bible, and my wife's sitting next to me. And then I just kind of start talking to her. We just kind of start talking and, kind of catching up on things. And the problem is when I'm sitting down there with my coffee and my Bible and my wife next to me, I found that, 30 minutes go by and we're talking, and I'm like, oh, kids are up. Close the Bible. Like, well, that wasn't effective. It was effective talking with my wife. But we've gotten to a point where, like, you know what? In the morning, I'm going to have to go somewhere else. Because that's important. And I'm not looking at my wife saying, hey, you're not important to talk to. We're going to have time to talk. But this is important that I find my own place, and I'm not distracted, and I spend time in silence and alone with God. Maybe it's grabbing a Bible and a notebook and having that with you and writing down your thoughts, writing down your distractions. Like any thought that comes to your mind, you write it down, you just push it to the side. Say, I'll come back to that later. That's not important right now. Maybe it's thoughts that God's bringing to your mind. You write that down. You're like, maybe I need to focus on these thoughts. It's practicing maybe Lectio Divina, what we talked about last week, the spiritual reading of Scripture. It can also be multiple small times during the day. It doesn't have to be an hour in the morning, or maybe it's a few minutes here and a few minutes there. Maybe instead of naturally reaching for your phone, you embrace the silence. Recently, I've been using my drive time to and from work every day as an additional silence and solitude time. I'll use the Lectio Divina 365 app. It's a phenomenal app that just, it speaks to you, but it's scripture and it's prayer and it's silent times. 10 minutes going to work and 10 minutes coming home. And it helps to center my mind heading into work, helps to recenter my mind heading to family and home, the two places that I want to be at my best. Now, the truth is, the more you seek out silence and solitude, the more you'll want to. The more you encounter Jesus on your own, the more you're going to want to encounter Jesus on your own. The more you enter into this space, the more you will exit with clarity and conviction in your calling of who God designed you to be and what God designed you to do.